The wildest thing about Huggy Wuggy in Chapter 5 is not that he comes back. It is that right when he finally feels more real than ever, the game rips him away again so fast you barely get time to understand what you just saw. That is why this chapter hit people so hard. If Huggy had only shown up to chase us one more time, that would be simple. Scary, yes, but simple. He returns, he hunts, the player runs, end of story. But Chapter 5 does something much smarter than that. It brings him back, shows us that he is still one of the most dangerous things in the whole factory, then gives him one tiny moment of peace that changes the way we see him forever. And right after that, the prototype destroys the moment before it can grow into something bigger. So, when people ask what happened to Huggy Wuggy in Poppy Playtime Chapter 5, the answer is not just he returned or he got attacked. The answer is much bigger. Chapter 5 changes Huggy from a monster you run from into one of the saddest parts of the whole story. For a long time, Huggy was easy to understand on the surface. He was the face of the factory, the giant blue nightmare standing in the dark, the toy that made the first chapter unforgettable. When people first met Poppy Playtime, Huggy was the reason they remembered it. That giant smile, those long arms, the way he could feel still and harmless one second, and then suddenly become the center of a full panic attack the next. In Chapter 1, he works perfectly as the factory's first real warning. He tells you fast that Playtime Co. is not an abandoned toy place with a few creepy details. It is a place where the toys themselves have become the danger. Then the end of Chapter 1 seems to solve him. He chases the player through the vents, the catwalk collapses, and Huggy falls deep into the factory. That scene looks final. It feels final. For years, a lot of people thought that was simply the end of him. Maybe not because the game said it directly, but because that is how stories usually work. Big chase, big fall, big silence after. Monster gone. But Chapter 5 destroys that idea. The official Chapter 5 description even frames the chapter as one where you go deeper into the factory with Huggy Wuggy in hot pursuit, which already tells us before the chapter even starts that the fall in Chapter 1 did not finish him. That one fact changes Huggy's whole place in the series, because the second the story proves that Huggy survived the Chapter 1 fall, he stops being a normal mascot monster. He becomes something harder to kill, harder to predict, and much more important than a one-chapter villain. If he can survive that, then every future, maybe, that killed him scene becomes less certain. The game taught us not to trust easy endings with him anymore. That is a huge part of why the tram scene in Chapter 5 started arguments instantly. The writers already showed us once that Huggy can come back after something that should have ended him. So when Chapter 5 hurts him again later, people naturally ask the same question all over again. And the chapter is very aware of that history. It does not bring Huggy back quietly. It opens with him, not in some cute hidden cameo way, not in a distant tease. The chapter starts by telling you Huggy is alive and angry and right in your face. He attacks hard, fast, and with the exact kind of pressure the game knows players remember from Chapter 1. That is a very smart move because it reminds you who he is before the chapter changes what he means. The story in the opening stretch makes it obvious that this is not a weaker leftover version of Huggy either. He is still a giant threat. He corners you, chases you, and rips away your advanced equipment early on, leaving the player in a much worse position. The fandom plot pages summarize that Chapter 5 begins with Huggy breaking in and pursuing the player through the lower levels, and other summaries note that the player loses stronger gear after the early run-in with him. That early attack matters for more than gameplay. It sets a mood. It tells you that even after all the chapters, even after Mommy, Catnap, the prison, the doctor, and the deeper factory secrets, Huggy still has the power to make the player feel small again. That says a lot about his place in the world. Some villains get replaced as a series goes on. They become old news. Chapter 5 refuses to let that happen to Huggy. It says no, this creature is still one of the factory's purest forms of fear. And yet, as the chapter moves on, it slowly starts adding something else to that fear. Pain, history, even pity. That is where Huggy becomes much more interesting than the simple version from Chapter 1. Because in Chapter 5, the player does not only run from him, The player also moves through places and clues that make the whole system around these toys feel more cruel than before. The deeper you go, the more the factory stops looking like a dead workplace and starts looking like a giant machine built to break people and rebuild them into something useful. By the time Chapter 5 is done, the whole place feels like it has one rule above all others. If something still has value, the factory or the prototype will keep using it. That rule matters for Huggy. Because if the factory still sees value in him, then surviving the Chapter 1 fall was not just lucky monster logic, it fits the world. Huggy is too useful to be treated like trash. He is strength, fear, speed, and a symbol, all in one body. He is the company's security nightmare made real. He is the thing you remember first when you think of Playtime Co. going rotten. So when Chapter 5 brings him back, it is doing more than a callback. It is showing that the old face of the factory still matters inside the prototype's world. And that is exactly what makes his later scenes so painful. Before we get there, we need to talk about what Chapter 5 quietly reveals about how this world works, because that explains why Huggy's change is so important. Poppy Playtime has always been about control. The company controlled children. The company controlled workers. The company controlled bodies through experiments. Later, the experiments themselves get controlled through fear, isolation, and abuse. Everything in this story is built around someone trying to make another living thing behave the way they want. That is why characters like Poppy, Kissy, and even Giblet matter so much. They are not only survivors, they are signs that control is not perfect. And by the time Chapter 5 reaches the tram station, Huggy becomes one of those signs too. That is the true shock of the scene. The tram station moment is not only there to be brutal, it is there to reveal something about Huggy that changes how the whole series feels. The story summary pages describe the key event clearly. The player reaches the tram area, Huggy returns to attack again, Kissy calms him down, and then the prototype impales both Huggy and Kissy with official-style summaries using words like presumably and seemingly killed instead of giving a hard final confirmation. That wording is very important. Not because presumably means they definitely lived, it does not, but because presumably means the story itself is leaving space. And once you notice that, the whole scene becomes less about one violent hit and more about what the writers want us to keep thinking about after the chapter ends. Now slow the tram scene down. Huggy comes back the way you expect. He is a threat. He is active. He is there to ruin your final push. For the player, the reaction is automatic. This is bad. This is one more nightmare on top of everything else. But then Kissy steps into the scene, and the rhythm changes. Huggy does not keep charging. He does not try to rip through her to get to you. He stops. That one stop is one of the biggest character moments in the whole series, and it happens with almost no words. He goes calm. Not friendly in a goofy cartoon way. Not suddenly normal, but calm. Still. Shocked. Like something buried deep under all the aggression suddenly reaches the surface because of her. The scene tells you that there is still recognition there. There is still a bond there. There is still enough of Huggy left for Kissy to matter more than the hunt. That is huge. Because for years, the easy version of Huggy was that he is the big monster from Chapter 1. The thing that hunts. The thing that bites. The thing that turns the factory into a death trap. But Chapter 5 says that is not all he is. Beneath all the fear, there is still a connection strong enough to interrupt him. And if that can happen, then the prototype has a problem. That is why I think the real meaning of the tram scene is not the prototype killed Huggy because he was in the way. That is too small. The timing says something much worse. The prototype attacks when Huggy stops being a perfect weapon. That means the prototype does not only fear strong creatures, he fears creatures that can still choose. Look at the order of events. Huggy in full rage is useful. He chases the player. He creates panic. He pressures the escape. He does the exact kind of work the prototype wants from a monster like him. But the second Kissy calms him, that usefulness starts slipping. Now, Huggy is unpredictable in a different way. He might hesitate. He might stop hunting. He might protect instead of attack. He might turn from a tool into a person again for a moment. And that is dangerous to a ruler like the prototype. That is why the attack feels so precise in meaning. The prototype is not simply entering the scene to kill, he is entering to erase a crack in his control. That is also why he goes for both Huggy and Kissy. If Huggy alone were the problem, maybe he kills Huggy and moves on. But he attacks Kissy too, because Kissy is the reason the change happened. She is the proof that the factory did not fully erase connection. She is the proof that love or memory or whatever word you want to use can still reach through all the conditioning and damage. The prototype cannot let that kind of proof stay alive. So the tram station scene becomes something much bigger than a shock death moment. It becomes a statement about the whole world of the game. The prototype does not only kill bodies, he kills bonds. That is the kind of ruler he is. He understands that control breaks when the experiments stop acting like isolated monsters and start acting like broken people who still remember each other. Huggy calming down in front of Kissy is a disaster for him, not because it helps the player in that exact second, but because it proves the toys can still reach each other outside his system. That is why the scene hurts so much. It is not only that two iconic characters get attacked, it is that one of the sweetest and saddest moments in the franchise is destroyed the instant it appears. Now, the big question, did Huggy actually die there? This is the part people keep fighting about, and honestly, the game set that up on purpose. If the writers wanted a neat answer, they could have given one. They could have held the camera longer, they could have shown the body in a clearer way, they could have made another character say it straight later. They did not. Instead, they gave us a violent, emotional, fast-moving scene and then forced the player onward. That kind of structure is made to keep doubt alive. And when you combine that doubt with Huggy's Chapter 1 survival, it gets even harder to call it cleanly. Remember what Chapter 5 already proved. Everyone thought Huggy was dead before. Then years later, he came back. So the game itself is the strongest argument against trusting easy finality with this character. It already used one fake ending on him. That means the idea of Huggy looked dead but survived anyway is no longer a wild fan dream. It is part of the series' history now. At the same time, we have to be fair. The prototype is not just some random attacker. He is the biggest threat in the factory. He knows how to hurt, how to break, how to kill, and how to do it fast. The tram station hit does look severe. If someone wants to argue that Huggy really is gone this time, the prototype's power is their best point, and it is a good point. So the only honest answer right now is this. Chapter 5 does not fully confirm Huggy's death. It leaves it open. And once you say that, the next question becomes more interesting than the first one. Why would the game leave it open? There are a few strong reasons. The simple reason is that Huggy is too important to throw away carelessly. He is one of the faces of the whole franchise. His return in Chapter 5 proves the writers know exactly how much emotional and symbolic power he still has. If you are going to close his story, you do not necessarily want to do it in a way that gives the audience full closure right away. You may want the question to keep breathing until the next chapter. The deeper reason is that Huggy's fate now carries meaning far beyond whether he lives or dies. The tram station scene changed what Huggy represents. He is no longer just fear. He is proof that the toys can still hold on to something under all the damage. So leaving his fate open means leaving that idea open too. Did the prototype completely stamp it out, or did it survive in some form? That is a huge Chapter 6 question. And there is an even darker reason the game might keep the answer hidden. What if survival is not good news? That possibility matters a lot in Poppy Playtime because survival in this world is almost never clean. Look at how things live here. The Outimals are alive, but in miserable, twisted ways. Harley Sawyer is alive, but as a trapped system mind. Lily survives her transformation, but her mind is shattered into something terrible. Even the player's Chapter 5 survival comes through Poppy Gel and feels deeply wrong. So, if Huggy survived the tram station, that does not mean he is okay. It does not mean he is hiding an event waiting to help you. It might mean the prototype took him back, reclaimed him, changed him, or damaged him even more. That is one of the strongest theories for what Chapter 6 could do. Not because it is flashy, but because it fits the story. The prototype collects. The prototype reshapes. The prototype punishes disobedience. So if Huggy's calm in front of Kissy counted as disobedience, then the prototype might not only want him dead, he might want him broken into a more useful form. That possibility is one of the reasons the scene feels so ugly after the chapter ends. The prototype does not only remove threats, he repurposes value, and Huggy has massive value inside this world. He is huge, strong, iconic, terrifying, and deeply tied to the factory itself. If there is any way to reclaim him, the prototype would want that. Again, not confirmed, but it is exactly the kind of direction the series could take. Now, another thing Chapter 5 changes is the way we read all of Huggy's earlier appearances. Before this chapter, you could still think of him as just the monster that started everything. After this chapter, that reading feels too thin. Once you see him stop for Kissy, you cannot unsee it. The scene rewrites him. It tells you there was always more buried in there than teeth and hunger. That makes Chapter 1 more tragic in hindsight, too. The giant blue mascot from the start was never only a killer in a toy body. He was already something broken and trapped. Chapter 5 does not invent that. It reveals it. And this is one of the reasons the question, what happened to Huggy Wuggy in Chapter 5, is much bigger than did he live or die. What happened is that the story finally let us see the human shape of the problem: tragedy. He came back alive after everyone thought he was gone. He spent the chapter as a living threat hanging over the player. Then, in one scene, he stopped being only a threat and became a wounded creature capable of connection. And the prototype responded by attacking him the instant that connection became visible. That is what happened to Huggy. The chapter turned him from a monster into evidence. Evidence that the factory did not fully erase who these beings were. Evidence that the prototype's control is not perfect. Evidence that love, memory, or recognition can still survive inside one of the oldest horrors in the whole game. That is why the tram station moment is not just emotional. It is political in the world of the story. It is about power. The prototype is making an example out of what happens when something under him starts acting outside its assigned role. Now, think about what that means for Chapter 6. If the writers want to pay this off, they have several paths. One path is the harsh one. Chapter 6 confirms Huggy is dead and uses that death as a permanent scar on the story. In that version, the tram station scene becomes the proof that the prototype will destroy any bond that threatens his control. That would be brutal, but it would work. Another path is the uncertain survivor path. Huggy lived, but badly damaged, maybe hidden somewhere, maybe barely hanging on, maybe seen only once in a tragic reveal. That would keep the emotional impact while still honoring his impossible durability. Another path is the darkest one. Huggy survived, but the prototype took him back and changed him into something worse. That would be devastating and would perfectly fit the chapter's theme of broken things being reused and twisted. And then, there is the hopeful path, the one people secretly want, even if they are afraid to say it too loudly. Huggy survives, and the calm we saw with Kissy means something real later. Maybe not a full redemption arc, not some happy best friend ending, but a final moment of choice. A moment where he is no longer only the factory's first monster, but one of the creatures who proves the prototype can lose his grip. That last path would be very strong, if done carefully, because it turns Huggy into more than a mascot. It turns him into a statement. And that matters because the prototype's greatest strength is not only physical power, it is control. So the strongest answer to him may not be bigger weapons alone. It may be creatures inside his world refusing their roles. Huggy already showed the first crack. Now we need to talk about the bigger Chapter 5 context around Huggy, because it changes how we understand his whole return. When the chapter starts, the player is in the deep factory with no safety, no stable team, and no clear way out. Huggy appearing there is not just fan service. It matters because of where it happens. The official material frames Chapter 5 as the player being pushed deeper into the wrong side of the factory, into the prototype's domain, with Huggy in pursuit. That positioning matters. Huggy is not random chaos down there. He is part of the prototype's world now. So when Huggy attacks through Chapter 5, you can read him in two ways at once. On the surface, he is still the old fear. Under that, he is one of the prototype's living tools. That makes the tram station change even bigger because it suggests the prototype's own tool can slip out of role under the right emotional pressure. That would absolutely terrify a ruler like him. And if you think that sounds too abstract, just look at how the prototype behaves with everyone else. He dominates Lily. He mutilates Poppy instead of killing her outright. He takes Poppy away because he wants control over her. He does not allow good moments to last. He interrupts, stamps down, reclaims. That is his pattern. The tram station is that pattern applied to Huggy. Huggy stops being useful in the correct way. The prototype corrects him. That is one of the ugliest details in the whole chapter, and it is what makes the scene feel more than violent. It feels cruel in a very personal way. Now, there is also a story value reason why I do not think the writers would want to waste Huggy too quickly after bringing him back. If Chapter 5's only purpose for him was surprise, he survived, now kill him for shock, that would still work on a surface level, but it would leave a lot of story value on the table. The chapter spends real effort showing that his connection to Kissy matters. That is not the kind of detail you build if you only want a disposable death scene. That is the kind of detail you build when you want the audience to carry the emotional thread forward. And carrying it forward is exactly what Chapter 6 needs. Because Chapter 6 already has a lot on its plate. Poppy is captured, Harley Sawyer is back as the backup, Giblet is still in the fight. The prototype is fully active and feels more like a ruler than ever. The player has survived in a way that now looks tied to the factory's gel and body horror. If Chapter 6 is really the final major chapter of this story arc, it needs emotional anchors as much as plot answers. Huggy and Kissy are perfect emotional anchors. They connect back to the earliest days of the series. They tie the old factory fear to the newer emotional truth. They represent the idea that these creatures might still be reachable. And the tram station scene turns that idea into a wound. That is not the kind of wound you ignore in the next chapter. Now, if we zoom out even further, there is something else Chapter 5 does with Huggy that changes the whole story's mood. It makes him part of the central tragedy instead of part of the background horror. In Chapter 1, he is the face of danger. In Chapter 5, he becomes the face of what the factory stole. That is a huge transformation. And that is why people feel so much around his scene, even though he barely gets any direct dialogue. The game does not need him to talk. His whole body tells the story. Rage, hunt, stop, recognition, calm, violence, removal. That is a full character arc compressed into one chapter. Not a complete arc maybe, because we do not know his final fate yet, but a real one. So when you ask what happened to Huggy Wuggy in Chapter 5, you can answer it in layers. On the plot layer, he returned alive after surviving Chapter 1's fall, hunted the player through the deep factory, reached the tram station, was calmed by Kissy, and then was attacked by the prototype. On the emotional layer, he stopped being just a monster and became tragic. On the thematic layer, he proved the toys are not fully empty, and the prototype reacted by trying to erase that proof. On the future layer, he became one of the biggest open questions heading into Chapter 6. And that future layer matters a lot, because what happens next will decide what Chapter 5's tram scene really means. If Huggy never appears again, and Chapter 6 confirms he died there, then the scene becomes the final proof of the prototype's cruelty and fear of connection. If Huggy returns, the scene becomes the beginning of a deeper rebellion inside the factory. If Huggy returns in broken form, the scene becomes proof that survival in this world is worse than death. Every one of those paths works. That is why the question keeps living. And honestly, that may be the best sign that the chapter handled him well. Now, I want to spend a little time on the tram scene's pace, because that is another reason it works. The scene is not slow and graceful. It is messy and fast. That pace keeps the player from emotionally settling. You do not get to stop and mourn. You do not get to confirm what you saw. The chapter yanks you into the next horror before your feelings can organize themselves. That creates the exact kind of uncertainty that horror loves. But it also mirrors the player's experience inside the story. The player does not get closure either. They see the attack. They get ripped away into the next crisis. They are pushed into the tram sequence, the prototype chase, the crash, the wound, the gel, and the loss of Poppy. So, the lack of clean answers around Huggy is not only for the audience, it is part of the protagonist's reality too. The whole ending is built around being denied closure. That is why it stays with people so strongly. Now, let's connect Huggy to Poppy for a second, because even though they do not share the same big final scene, Chapter 5 uses both of them to teach us the same thing about the prototype. The prototype does not want dead enemies as much as he wants controlled pieces. He hurts Poppy and takes her. He attacks Huggy when Huggy slips out of role. He attacks Kissy because she causes the slip. This is not the behavior of a simple destroyer. It is the behavior of something that is constantly maintaining order. That means Huggy's story in Chapter 5 is not separate from Poppy's story in Chapter 5. They are parallel examples of how the prototype treats anything that threatens his shape of the world. Poppy threatens him through rebellion. Huggy threatens him through connection. And he answers both with force. That is one of the strongest clues to what Chapter 6 will actually be about. Not just killing the prototype, but breaking his hold over the things and people inside his world. Now, I want to go to the player's side for one moment, because our relationship to Huggy also changes in Chapter 5. At the start of the franchise, Huggy is the enemy. Simple. He hunts us, we survive him, end of thought. After Chapter 5, that relationship gets more complicated. The player still fears him, of course. The chapter makes sure of that. But by the time the tram station scene happens, the player is also witnessing something that feels almost private, something tragic. The game is making us see Huggy not just from the victim side anymore, but from the "this is what this place did to him" side. That is a huge shift in empathy. And if the story continues that shift in Chapter 6, the player may eventually face a choice, or at least a moment where understanding Huggy matters more than fearing him. That could be very powerful if the writers go there. Because a monster being terrifying is easy. A monster being terrifying and heartbreaking at the same time is much harder. Chapter 5 finally gets Huggy there. Now, another small but important point is that Huggy's return in Chapter 5 helps prove how long and how deep the factory's hidden life goes. He did not just survive one fall and pop back out right away. He stayed down there through the years of silence, through whatever happened in the deeper levels, through all the shifting control under the factory. That means Huggy is part of the old world and the new world at once. He belongs to the original Playtime co-horror, but he is also still active in the prototype's later domain. That makes him a bridge character. He links Chapter 1's simple terror to Chapter 5's much more complex tragedy. And stories love bridge characters in finales because they make the whole narrative feel connected. They make the beginning matter again at the end. So if Chapter 6 really is the final major step, Huggy is one of the best characters to use for that connective force. That is another reason why I think his story is not finished in a clean way yet. Now, since we are talking about what happened to him, I want to say one thing clearly. Even if Huggy survived, surviving is not a happy answer. This matters so much in Poppy Playtime. People sometimes talk about survival like it is automatically good news. But in this world, survival often means more pain, more distortion, more use by someone stronger. The factory never gives out easy life. It gives out ugly life. So if Huggy made it through the tram station, that could lead to something much worse than just Huggy returns. It could mean the prototype drags him away and reworks him. It could mean Huggy becomes less himself, not more. It could mean the calm Kissy brought out gets crushed and buried deeper. That possibility is why the mystery works so well. You are not only uncertain, you are uncertain in a bad direction. The unknown is not comforting. And that is exactly how a good horror cliffhanger should feel. Now, if I had to say what the chapter's final message about Huggy is, I would put it like this. Chapter 5 reveals that Huggy Wuggy is not just the monster who survived Chapter 1. He is the monster who survived long enough for the story to show us he was always more than a monster. That is what happened to him. He came back. He proved he was still one of the deadliest things in the factory. He showed there was still memory and connection inside him. And then he became one of the clearest signs that the prototype fears any crack in his control. Whether he is dead, alive, or something in between after the tram scene, that truth does not change now. The game already gave it to us. And honestly, that may be why the scene hurts so much. Not because we lost the old Huggy from Chapter 1. We already knew he was dangerous. It hurts because right when the story let us see something human in him, it threatened to take him away again. That is the real pain. The pain is not only violence, it is interruption. The interruption of healing, the interruption of connection, the interruption of a future where maybe, just maybe, Huggy was not doomed to stay exactly what the factory made him. That is why people still care so much about this one scene. It is not only about a blue monster, it is about whether anything good can still survive in this place once the prototype notices it. And right now, the only honest answer is that Chapter 5 leaves that question open on purpose. So, what happened to Huggy Wuggy in Poppy Playtime Chapter 5? He survived the impossible once, came back as one of the chapter's biggest threats, showed us he still had a real bond with Kissy, and then got caught in one of the most brutal moments in the whole game when the prototype attacked the second that bond became visible. His exact final fate is still left unclear, but the chapter makes one thing certain. Huggy is no longer just the monster from the start of the story. He is one of the saddest parts of it. Watch the next video.